Hello friends, welcome to my channel once again. So in our previous DBT session, we looked at how to create our DBT account on the DBT cloud and then set up our first project in the DBT cloud account. I will add the link to that video in the description tag. If you have not seen that video, please go and set up your first project. Now in today's video tutorial, we will be learning to develop an end-to-end data pipeline using DBT inside Snowflake. So what we will be actually doing is that in our raw schema, we had copied these tables from TPCH schema, customer, nation, region, and orders. So we will be creating DBT models to create a view in the STG schema with the name customer details, which will be combining the information from customer, nation, and region to give all the details, including the nation name and the region name for every customer. And then we will combining this view with orders table in a new model, which will be eventually creating a table into our RPT schema with the name order summary, and in which we will be giving two matrices for every region. One, the number of orders for that particular region, and total amount for all the orders in that particular region. This is a demo, or this is an example of a reporting level table which can then be consumed using BI tool. So to create this data pipeline end to end, we need to understand few concepts beforehand. So what we will be covering within this video tutorial is that what is a dbt underscore project.yml file, what is its importance, what is the directory structure which is usually followed in a dbt project, what are dbt sources, uh, what is a generate underscore schema underscore name macro, and then once we get the understanding of all these topics, we will create and implement our DBT data pipeline. So let us quickly start and the video tutorial. So when we completed our project setup in a previous session, video session, we landed here, and this is the default directory structure which we received. So first of all, we need to understand what is the dbt underscore project.yml. So if we go to the documentation of dbt itself, dbt project.yml is the file which is used to declare any project a dbt project, and by default dbt looks into your current directory and all the parent directories one by one to find the dbt project.yml file. It has nothing but multiple configurations which are applicable for our project. So if I show you what dbt underscore project.yml has in our case, first of all, it declares the namespace for our project, then version configuration. Version and configuration need to remain same, but you can change this namespace name. But you need to ensure that if you are changing this, then you should change this globally across all the files wherever it has been used. For example, in this dbt underscore project.yml, it is being used at the bottom to declare the configuration. So this should be identical everywhere. Next is nothing but it is defining some paths for various resources within DBT. So the model path is the model directory, test path is the test directory, macro path is the macro directory, and snapshot path is snapshots directory. But if you are changing, for example, if you are creating a new directory where all your macros should be stored, then you need to update that path here so that DBT project so that the project can look into that particular directory by default. This is all the information. Another thing at the very high level to explain is that in the dbt underscore project.yml, you declare the global configurations as well as the global variables, though you can always override them at the model level. But whenever you are not overriding, those configurations and variables will be applicable. So we will see an example of this later on in this video. So this is the directory structure. As I said, macro is used for storing the macros, model for models. If you go inside the model, we get by default example directory created in which there are two models created by default. So these are nothing but sample models. What important thing to note here is that all the models should be created with SQL extension inside DBT model. Another point to note is that you can have models in multiple directories, but every time the model name should be unique across all the directories within the models directory. So these are the two most important points to remember. Next is our seeds directory. I will explain it later sessions what it is used for. Snapshots are the objects or models in Snowflake which are used to implement SCD2 implementation. Later in the video tutorials, we will see an implementation of this as well. whichever models we have written in our DBT project, they all are always converted into corresponding SQL queries and then are executed in the target data platform, which in our case is Snowflake. So whenever this happens, those SQL queries which are being executed are always stored in this target directory in the compiled and run section. So you can always come here and see what was the exact SQL query which got executed under a DBT model. And test is to store all the tests. Now, if you work with any code versioning tool, you always have one main branch, which is usually used for production, and you are not always allowed to make any direct changes directly into that branch. So similar in the DBT, we have one main branch where we are not allowed to make any changes. So if we need to make any changes, we need to change this branch. Through this link we can change it. One usual problem which people face is that they do not see this change branch frequently. The reason is that if there is anything pending in the commit section, then this change branch link will not be active. So if you do not see it, please ensure that everything is committed and pushed. So let us change it. Another issue which usually people go into is that they have created a development branch, or they have created a branch in the GitHub in the repository, but they do not see it. So if you go to my GitHub section into the repository, you can see I have already created two branches. How to create a branch? You can simply come here into the branches section. I already have main branch, which is the main branch which will be used for production. Then I have created a dev branch. You can always create a new branch. You can give a branch name here, and from which you need to pull out this branch. We can pull it from main. So that way you can create a new branch. Now you can see that in my DBT tutorials repository, I have three branches. The branches are main, dev, and demo branch. Now if I go to my DBT and see it, I will not see the demo branch here. So what is the solution? Solution is that I need to refresh my IDE so that it can pull all the information or all the latest branches which has been created in my GitHub repository. So now if I go to change branch, we can see that the newly created demo branch is available here, and now we can change it. We will be using the dev branch where I have created some models. So now my dev branch is active and I can make changes to it. I have created an integration directory where I will be creating all of my models. Definitely in a real project, we cannot use the example directory. It can be any name. In my case, I have simply used it, the integration name. Now, one discussion which usually happens is that what kind of directory structure we should follow for a DBT project. Now, if you understand the data pipelines, what happens in a data pipeline is that you there are multiple objects like tables and views in different Snowflake schemas. You create an SQL query which combines these objects in different schemas, do the transformation, apply the business logic, and then store all the results as output in a table or a view in some target schema. Now, very frequent approach while creating a directory structure in DBT project is that you create dedicated folders within your models directory to corresponding to each schema, and whichever models which create those objects like views or tables in those schemas, all those should be hosted in that particular folder. So if any model is creating a table or view inside your RPT schema, then it should be created within the RPT folder. And if any model is creating your view or table inside STG schema, then it should be created in the STG folder. This way it will always be easy to identify uh, from a particular object inside your Snowflake where to look or which directory to look at for that particular DBT model. Before we create our models, we need to understand what are DBT sources. So like as I said, in a data pipeline, we need to read data from some tables or views, perform some transformations, and then store it into some target table. So how would DBT know what are the objects, tables, or views created into my Snowflake? That's where this sources and .yml comes handy. So in this file, I can declare all the objects could be like tables or views which I want to be available in my DBT. Understand this, that these objects are already created in my Snowflake account, and I am not creating them via DBT. So if you remember, in our previous session, we had created the TPCH schema tables, order, summary, nation, region in our raw analytics.raw schema. So if we go to our Snowflake session, we can see that we have different tables, orders, customer, sorry, orders, customer, nation, region. So these objects are already created into my Snowflake account, but I want them to be available in my DBT project. So that is why I am declaring them as a source in my sources.yml. So here I am giving a name to my source. It is my project. It could be anything you want to give. Here, then I am declaring the database, which is analytics, schema, which is raw, and then the name of my objects. So these objects will be available using the my project source and then the name. So now we can go to integration directory. In the STG, what I am trying to do is, right now, if you go to Snowflake account and see in the customer table, I have customer, but I do not have the information like which nation it belongs to and which region it belongs to. But I have one column which is a foreign key column, C underscore nation key. Through this nation key column, I can combine it with the nation table, and from nation I also have another key which is region key, through which I can connect it with the region. So all I want is that my a single view where I have all the customer details along with which nation and which region name it belongs to. So I can simply achieve this through this query. I am joining the customer table with the nation based on nation key, and then nation table with region based on the region key, and then I'm simply grouping that in a particular region how many customers I have. So if I run this query, I can see this, that in particular region how many customers I have. So if you can write an SQL query, you can pick that same SQL query, put it into the DBT model, and simply do certain changes, and you can get your final model created. So we will use this very query and in our DBT model. So if we go to our STG, because this is an intermediate table or a view, I want it to be created into the STG schema in the customer details. You can see that this is the same query which is written there. Instead of simply getting the count for the region, I am gathering all the details. So I am from customer, I am picking customer key, name, address, phone. From the name nation, I am picking the nation name. From the region, I am picking the region name. Now, DBT provides us internal helper functions which help us to refer the DBT objects. In DBT, all the models which are created are DBT objects, and you can refer them using internal referer functions. In this particular case, what we have done in our sources.yml, we have created internal DBT objects which are referring to the Snowflake already created objects. For example, in our source name, my project dot object name nation is an internal DBT object or internal DBT source, which is referring to a table inside Snowflake, which is actually analytics.raw.nation. In the similar way, the region internal object or internal source object is referring to a table in Snowflake, which is analytics.raw.region. So what we are doing here is that we are referring to our internal source objects using this source function. Inside it, it takes two arguments. First is the source name to which we are referring. In this sources.yml, we have given the source name as my project, so it will be same. And then the source object which we are referring to. So what will happen during compilation is that DBT will come here, and once it fetches this source function, it will fetch all the corresponding details, and then it will replace it with a fully qualified Snowflake object name. So basically this text will be replaced with the analytics.raw.customer. In the same fashion, nation call this source function will be replaced with a fully qualified Snowflake object name, which will be analytics.raw.nation, and in this region it will be converted as analytics.raw.region. Now in the next step, what we are doing is we are simply selecting everything which is there in the final CTE. The next decision we need to make is that whether this object should be created as a table or as a view in our STG schema or target schema. This we can define through the configuration block. So there are configurations specific to model which can be declared in the dbt underscore project.yml as well as in a particular model file as well. If we go to the dbt documentation, we can see that there are three ways the model configurations can be defined. what are the basic configurations, like which database the object should create it, which schema the object should create it, whether it should be created as a view or a table, things like that. What should be the alias name, what should be the query tag name. So these are the generic configurations. So in you can define them in the project dbt underscore project yml. I will show you the example of this. You can also define it in the property file, though this option is usually not followed. The second best option is that you can define the model specific configurations in the model file itself using the config block. For example, like here we have given in the config block, we have defined that it should be materialized as a view. The alias name should be customer detail. Now what is it, what it is that this object will be created as customer dot underscore details name. If you have not given this, by default whatever is the file name, the object will be created with that name. In my case, though both are same, but it is always a good practice to use this alias configuration. In this schema, I have given that I already have an stg schema and this object should be created in stg schema. So you can give a lot of configurations here, but this is enough for this model. So let us run this. To run a particular DBT model, you simply need to come to this command pane and write the DBT run command, DBT run double hyphen select, and then the model name. You can give the full model name like customer underscore details.sql, or you can give only the model name before the extension. So customer underscore details. What we are expecting, that it should create one view inside our stg schema. So let us run this. And this is executing. At the background, it is basically reading this model and converting it into an SQL query. Now it has failed. Though I already knew it will fail, but I wanted to show you the reason why it has failed. So let us go to the system logs. Here it gives me the reason. If we go to the details section, it will show you the reason why it has failed. It has failed because it was trying to create a schema inside the analytics database with the name schema raw underscore stg. Now the important point to understand is we wanted it to be created within the stg schema, and we already have that created. Why it is creating raw underscore stg schema? Now this is because of the default behavior of dbt. dbt has multiple jinja macros to get different informations during model execution. Like one of the jinja function is generate schema name, which is used with every dbt model execution, and the work of this jinja function is to get the target schema name in which it should be created. So if your schema name, like here we have given a schema name in our configuration section, this is, it is referring it as a custom schema name. So if you have given a custom schema name, if it is equal to the default schema, if you remember in our previous session, we had selected the default schema as raw. So if your customer schema name is default is equal to default schema name, it simply gives back you the schema name, which will be always default. But if it is not, by default, it prepends the default schema name with the custom schema name which you have given. Now in our case, definitely we do not want this behavior, right? So what we would do is we will simply copy this. Now by the way, this jinja macro definition is present in the dbt documentation only. You can simply search with this generate underscore schema underscore name jinja, and it will bring you to this page. So we will go into our macro directory. Because this is a macro, in this I have created a macro file. Always remember that macro file should always be with extension sql, and I will paste it here. Now what behavior I want, that if I have given the custom schema name, the object should be created in that particular schema only. So I will simply remove this part and save it. Now what will happen is, whatever I have in my local as a macro, the behavior will be overridden. So now if I go to the model and execute it again, it is expected to be executed perfectly now. Now it has completed its execution in 2 seconds. Now what we can do is we can see what actually is happening underneath. So first of all, it is logging into the Snowflake and creating a session. Then it is reading our model definition as it is. It is replacing all the Jinja references we have given with actual fully qualified object names, and then eventually it is wrapping it up in a CTAS SQL query and then creating the object. In our case, it was view. If it was given as a table, it would be a table. Create or replace view, the name which we have given as the alias name, customer underscore details, and then the underlying query which we have defined as a model definition. So the expectation is that a view should be created. So if I simply refresh it, in the STG schema, I see the customer details view is already there. I can go and select the data from it as well. Select star from the fully qualified name I need. I can simply apply the limit so that we can get the response quickly. So here I see the customer details along with the nation name for that particular customer and region name. Now, as a part of data pipeline, my next step is that in the orders table, I have all the orders for a particular customer, and I want to aggregate all those orders with two matrices, number of orders for a particular region and the total amount of orders placed by a particular region. So I can go to my DBT model. Now, because I want this specific object to be created in RPT schema, so I will create this model into RPT. I have already given it name order underscore summary.sql. And what would be the query look like? So if I go here and I see that I can connect my raw.orders table with the newly created view stg.customer underscore details based on customer ID or customer key, and simply aggregate all the data for a region name, calculate the number of orders and the total amount of orders. So if I run this is my expected output. Now to develop the corresponding DBT model, I can simply pick this here and put it in the DBT model file and simply replace my object references. For example, orders, as I declared earlier in the sources.yml, I have one orders table already created. Now, customer detail was not a source, it was a created object by DBT, or it was a DBT model. To reference a DBT model, you can use the ref Jinja function and simply pass the model name. Now that is the reason I said in the beginning that every model name should be unique irrespective of the directory in which it has been created, because if it is not a unique name, you will get an error here because it will have multiple models to point to. So I have simply replaced the table names and given the DBT references, and rest is nothing. Now, one thing you may notice here is that I have not given the config block. So how I am ensuring in this case that this particular object should be created into the RPT schema? That's where my dbt underscore project.yml comes handy. So if I go to my dbt project.yml, at the bottom section, I have defined configuration for all the models. So if you go to the directory structure, inside the models, I have integration directory, and inside my integration directory, I have directory for each schema. So here in the models, my new project is the namespace. Then inside it is an integration directory, and then inside this, the RPT folder is there. So this is the YML format. You need to follow this format strictly. Here I have defined that all the models within the RPT schema, they should be materialized. That means created as the tables, and the schema, they should always be created in the RPT. If I want, I can change this to table to view, and then I can also override it in the order summary model itself. But right now I do not want to do that. I want it to be created as a table in the RPT schema. So whenever I execute any model inside the RPT folder, these two configurations will be applied by default. So let us go and run this model now. dbt run double hyphen select, then the model name, which is order underscore summary. Let us execute this. So it is running now. It got completed in almost 5 seconds. So if you see underlying in the details section, logs, it is again the same, that our model definition was picked up, got converted into a qualified SQL query. All the references were replaced with the fully qualified names, and then it got wrapped up with the CTAS, create or replace transient table, and then the table name as, and then it got executed into our Snowflake account. So if we go here, we should see one table. Let us refresh this. In the RPT, we see the order summary table. We can see the data inside it. So what we did actually, we picked data from some sources, we performed the intermediate transformations and stored it into the STG layer, and then whatever transformations we had made, we picked that up also and created the reporting level table. If you see this data pipeline in DBT, you can go to the lineage section, and here in the lineage you will see the complete data pipeline itself. So first of all, we had three sources were combined to create one DBT model, which is customer underscore detail, and then this model was another again joined with another source, which is my project dot orders, and then a different model was created. Now this lineage section is very important. It helps you identify the impact of any change. Suppose I have further, after order summary, I have another model on top of this. Now if I want to analyze what would be the impact of making changes into the customer details, the changes could be like removal of any column or addition of any column, or maybe change in the logic. So which all models will be impacted? So through this linear section in the DBT, I can quickly find out and point out my testing, integration testing to those specific models only. So this is how we create data pipelines, end-to-end data pipelines into DBT. This is all for this video. If you find this video helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video. Thank you.